Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about House of M by Brian Michael Bendis and illustrated by Olivier Copied. The version I read contains books 1 through 8, and this is the collection cover. So, to go into my overview, House of M is an event comic. So what this means is basically it's like a big team up comic with implications to impact major story elements beyond the standard 8 to 12 comics arc. So, for example, one big event comic was the Civil War event comic, where they're able to span multiple storylines out of it, and the story itself usually has major implications beyond just that kind of arc, but for future stories as well. Another example from DC would be like the Court of Owls. So this story actually begins with an unraveling Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch, being confronted by Professor Charles Xavier, the leader of the X-Men and founder of Xavier School. He's also one of the most powerful mutant psychics in the world. So right off the bat, we're informed that Wanda has just had a mental breakdown resulting in the deaths of 3 Avengers. So to address this, the Avengers and the X-Men meet privately to discuss what course of action to pursue, including potentially killing the Scarlet Witch to ensure she is no longer a threat to humanity. Ultimately deciding they need to visit the mutant city of Genosha, where Scarlet Witch is being held. Upon their arrival, the world suddenly changes. This is where the story really begins. Before we dive any deeper, I do want to stress that there will be some spoilers in this video, so please do proceed with caution. So to go into the plot and pacing of the story, waiting to find the world has changed and his memories are muddied, Wolverine begins to search for his fellow New York heroes, finding more questions as he works to uncover the truth behind what's happening. The major characters who impact this story are Wolverine, Emma Frost of the X-Men, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Magneto. We're also introduced to a new character, Layla Miller, a mutant who in this world has the power to unlock memories shrouded under this new existence. So like most comic stories, there are a cast of other well and lesser known characters, but the ones I listed above have the greatest actual impact on the story itself. Now to talk about some of the themes found within the story. This story examines a couple of key questions, starting with how much would you be willing to give up to do the right thing? In House of M, our characters are faced with living a life in which they have essentially everything they ever wanted, but if you know it's not real, is it really worth living? Another question the story asks is, what would it mean to you to no longer be a minority, but a majority? And how would life be different as a result? Particularly when we're talking about characters of mutants, it's easy to see that in a lot of ways mutants are representative of a lot of the minority groups, particularly within American culture. Another thing that really struck me when I was reading this book was how people react to those with mental illness, and specifically the treatment of people who are believed to be mentally unwell. So in this specific story, we're talking about a lot of our superheroes who self-appointed enforcers of the law, but they barely bat an eye at the thought of killing someone like Wanda Maximoff, who is both a mutant and an Avenger, who both the X-Men and the Avengers have worked with extensively and know very, very well. And our heroes here are even arguing about something like who is going to deliver the killing blow to her. So when I was thinking about this a little bit further, I couldn't help but think about how many cops are shown to abuse the power given to them, specifically in American society. We see super similar actions being taken here by the world's would-be defenders, commonly taking matters into their own hands regardless of the following consequences. Now I want to talk about some of the good and bad aspects of the story. So firstly, I thought this was a really fun read. It has some really great action sequences, and in general, the premise is actually super interesting. But to address some of the less strong or bad elements of the story, firstly, I want to say that the layout of the comic specifically can actually be a little bit hard to follow at times. So for example, some of the top panels tend to cross over 2 pages. So they cross over the kind of median turn section, but not always as one kind of enlarged or extended image, but sometimes as actual different text boxes, which when you're typically reading a comic style, at least in the English version for US comics, it's usually you read the left page similar to exactly how you would read a novel. Start with the left page, move to the right, top to bottom, both sides. So at times that can be a little bit daunting if you're not exactly sure where the flow of the comic can be. And when I was reading through this, there were a couple pages or a couple sections where I was a little bit confused on what the flow of the page actually was supposed to be. Additionally, I have to say the inclusion of the character Layla Miller was pretty frustrating to me. So I didn't mind her so much like as a character because honestly there was no real character development to speak of at all. She's basically just a plot tool that works as a super easy way for Wolverine to be able to help other heroes remember their past without actually using any real wits or effort on his part. I can't help but feel like in general the story acts a little bit less like what I think of an event comic, something that's really groundbreaking and exciting. And for me, this wasn't really a fantastic standalone work, more of a vehicle to redirect comics canon for future storylines that the Marvel team is building out. So to give my final thoughts here, I think in general, this story actually has a really, really great premise, and it could have been a super outstanding story, but it falls a bit flat. So the art feels a little bit dated. A lot of the dialogue is too wordy without really saying much. Some of the characters seem to be acting out of place, and it doesn't really feel like a dynamic team up so much as a narrative driven mostly by one or two characters. In my opinion, I think this is an event comic that you can skip reading. Maybe just read an online summary if you're reading stories which directly reference House of M. Thank you so much for watching. Has anybody read House of M? If so, what did you think about it? Did you completely disagree with my ideas or did you agree? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, feel free to leave any suggestions in the comments below. I always review those. Until the next time, thank you so much.